Hey guys, this is Dan with Gears and Gadgets. Thanks for tuning in. Today we are talking about running boards. These are the AMP PowerStep Vision. Now I've had the opportunity to do a bunch of different running boards on this channel. When I first bought my 2015 GMC Sierra, I went with the AMP PowerStep. On the last truck I had the PowerStep Extreme. And these are actually kind of right in the middle of both of those in terms of where they fall in the lineup. What makes these the Vision is that they actually have an LED light strip that runs down the entire length of the board. And there is an app, so you can actually change what those colors look like. We'll talk about that in a moment. But first, why do you need power steps in the first place? My daughter, one of the first things she said to me when I first got this truck was, "Dad, when are you gonna put steps in this thing? I can't get in." She had a hard time getting up there on her own to the point where I had to kind of hoist her on up. And now she has the independence to get up in the truck by herself. Also works out really well for when I myself am trying to access things in the back of the truck that might be kind of up in this area here. Now the heavy duty trucks actually have a step built in right here that you can kind of get up there. The 1500s, they do not. Another nice thing is that when these steps retract, they go away. You know, they kind of tuck up tight so that you don't lose any clearance. One thing I don't like about the OEM steps, first and foremost, is that they tend to be kind of tucked up in. I have some video from my 2021 F-150, and you can see when you go to step on the step, they're tucked in so far that you really only kind of catch your heel on that step, not really the entire portion or a significant portion of your foot. What ends up happening with those steps is because you end up kind of with a natural motion where you kick your leg out, I find myself just missing the step altogether and kind of just sliding down to get out of the truck. These seat bolsters end up taking an absolute beating when you do that kind of stuff. Now, another thing that I've always found valuable with any step is that it's also nice when you're out on a job site and you have muddy boots to have something to kind of kick all that mud off of before you're dragging it into your truck. Now, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of this video, and that is realtruck.com. My biggest thing on this channel is that if I'm going to accept some sort of sponsorship, it needs to be I control my narrative and it's just authentically myself. Realtruck.com, they've got it all from tonneau covers to bed rugs, swing cases, wheels, tires, running boards, lighting. And I will link Realtruck.com in the description down below. Thank you to Realtruck.com for allowing me to be me and share with you guys the experience of building out these trucks the way that I would do it on the other side of this camera. And that's how I've approached all of the content on this channel. So we'll fire the truck up here and we'll talk about why the PowerStep Vision. Not only can you control the lighting, but it is also nice to be able to retract the steps if you don't want them to go down with the doors open, or to deploy them, say when you're at the car wash and you're trying to actually get these things clean. The light strips, we can change these to whatever it is that we want, which is really nice to have this configurability in here. We'll change it to blue, and there you can see a blue light. Now, when it comes to lighting like this on the exterior of your vehicle, check with local laws. It all depends on where you're at in terms of what colors you can and cannot show when rolling down the street. I did have red on here, and I think it looks really sharp with the AT4 package because this truck kind of has that red badging. I did just decide for the retracted phase to have it be off. So that's how I'm running it for now, but you can also, when the steps are deployed, change what those colors are. So it is nice when you kind of open that up to have everything outside get lit up. So with that said, we're going to throw it back to the garage for the install. Now, Realtruck says that these boards will take anywhere from 3 to 5 hours. It took me 5 hours and 44 minutes in a 113-degree garage while recording a YouTube video. That's pretty good. I would say that it was the equivalent of basically maybe installing these things with one hand tied behind your back. Anytime you add the filming aspect and then throw it into a 100+ degree garage, probably going to slow you down a little bit for taking breaks and things like that. I think that the difficulty level they have marked here as a 4 out of 4 for experienced, I'm going to say that's accurate. But if you have a comfortability with working with electronics on vehicles, I would actually bump that down to maybe a 3 out of 4, if not maybe even a 2 to 3, somewhere in that range. The hardest part of doing this is always running the harness across the engine bay down into the wheel wells and kind of doing all that stuff, getting it all tucked in, and also having to tap into some of the factory wiring. Again, if you're not really all that into the electronics thing, you can take it to a shop and have them do it. But for the most part, I think your average DIYer can absolutely knock this out on their own within that 3 to 5 hour range. So we'll just set our steps off to the side. Keep this one wrapped up for now. Set it on top. Oh, smash it up. They label the boxes real nice. So you have this one here, motor linkages, and this one, the rear idler linkage. I'm already out of breath out here. It's the temperature out here. It is already 108 degrees out here in the garage, so another toasty one today. I've started to really appreciate how, yes, some of this stuff is an option from the factory, but in this situation, the side steps for an AT4 are not the power steps. They are kind of regular rock slidery type steps. I'm not sure how good those would even be. So the options for power steps on the Sierra are available as you go up in trim, but in order to get them, you've got to go up to the Denali, which is an extra $5,300 on top of the price tag. When you start talking about getting options that you want because you want them, but they require you to go up in options or up in trim level, unfortunately when you're doing that, you're actually just buying way more vehicle than you wanted to in the first place. Here we have the wiring harness. So these are the two different linkages. One that is set up to receive the motor, which drives them up and down. And then here is just the idler. So this just kind of rides up and down to guide the step up and down. They're pretty solid. You'll see after I get them installed. So the first step is going to be mounting the motors. There is a backing plate that goes on here. Your motor sits up on top of that. And you really can't mess this up because the way that they've got these holes lined up here is it can only go in one orientation. Now, I do torque these down to the recommended torque specs, and I have never had any problems with these whatsoever, and I don't anticipate starting now. They say 36 inch-pounds. The nice thing about these step kits is that they're actually really easy to do with pretty basic tools. This is a T25 bit. That's probably the hardest thing that your average person would have to make sure they had in their tool kit was some Torx bits, and also a cheap Tecton torque wrench. This is 36 inch-pounds. We'll torque it down. Anytime I'm doing any installs with anything that has this engineered plastic type stuff, I like to make sure that I'm torquing down to spec. You don't want it too loose. So there's always a fear of having it too loose because you're afraid of cracking plastics, or over tightening and actually cracking plastics. Cheap torque wrench was a cheap insurance policy. Get the second motor unwrapped here and installed. Again, really basic stuff here. So the motors are installed, and then we'll go ahead and get the linkages installed up on the truck. I'm gonna lay out my hardware. If you don't have organizer trays, you should. Those make a big difference when doing stuff like this and not just having to like dig through bags looking for parts and pieces. So the idler linkages go to the front of the truck and the motors to the rear. This one here, based on the orientation of the instructions. Sometimes getting these plugs out is kind of one of the trickiest parts. You gotta get a screwdriver up underneath there to get a trim tool in there. I f***ed up. I gotta pull this motor off. So you're supposed to actually install these motors with the idler halfway opened so that you don't run into this issue that I just ran into here. I make mistakes so you don't have to. So much easier when you do it the right way. Who would have thought? 16 foot-pounds. Now into the actual installation of the boards onto these arms. And this RGB connector you're going to want to have towards the front of the truck. There's these little aluminum pieces here that are threaded, and these go onto the arm, and that is actually what the fasteners screw into. So these just need to be positioned as you're putting them on. I just usually eyeball them. It's a bit of a feel operation slash eyeball, and you'll know when you get it in there because it kind of grabs. Now, I always like to cheat my boards back a little bit to give myself a little bit more to step on the back of the truck, to kind of step up over when I'm like cleaning the rear windows, things like that. There we go. And then once you get it there, just kind of step back, take a look. Yep, I like that. Set our torque wrench to 13.6 Newton meters. And tighten these bad boys down. Now we'll do the same thing over on the passenger side. All right, torque down. Man, I'm dying out here. Let's see what the temperature is in the garage now. We are 111.6 degrees in the garage. Outside is 112, so keep it nice and cool in here. So now there's a RGB controller and a step controller. The other units tend to only have one because they don't have the RGB. Let's open up our wiring harness. I always like to take these wire harnesses and kind of get a rough idea of where they're going and what they're doing. I'm going to pull all of these fuses. There's 3 different holders here. You've got 30, 10, and 30. So just for my sake, it might say this in the instructions, but I'm going to label these just so I know where I pulled them out of. But I'm going to pull all the fuses, which is a good thing to do. I do think this could have been a little more elegant how they did this fuse block thing. I might zip tie these all together. All right, pop the hood and get moving. So just roughly lay this harness out. I always try to get these harnesses as untangled as humanly possible so that the install is nice and clean, including going around hood struts. Take care of disconnecting our battery. We'll hook up our controllers. Kind of tucked down in here. Not a ton of space over here, but something along those lines. I like to actually pull these little clips out and use the factory mounting locations, these little plastic grommets, to run the zip ties through. It's a real clean way to do it. Looks like this is supposed to drop down right in the middle between the air intake and the coolant reservoir. I gotta say, I totally forgot about how nasty these greased up frames are from GM. All right, so that's plugged in. Run this to the motor right behind you guys. I like to run these wire harnesses up above the frame rail. Keep it from getting pinched. Make sure I get as much of this wax on me as possible. And then this will plug in back here. And we'll drop this one down. We're getting there, one step at a time. Stuck on my sweaty arm. Up to this connector here. That's done. Attach the negative. Now, with these wire harnesses, I like to just work my way from the back to the front of the truck. That's how I go up?
Yeah, it's up.
So I've been running these AMP PowerStep Vision's version of their board now for over a month, and it's been absolutely fantastic, as I would expect it to be, because I've never had a single issue with any of these running boards, and they are very stout in their ability to hold up to, well, my weight, I'm 210 pounds, 6'1", and I think they go up to like 400 pounds. So certainly no issues in terms of weight capacity. And again, I really wouldn't worry too much about having to run the dual motor setup. I think the single is fine with the idler linkage, seems to be all right for me. Maybe unless you're in some really, really extreme environments, I don't see that being an issue. So again, I will link these boards down in the description down below. Real Truck, Amp, they've all been fantastic to work with. Now these also have a great warranty, but what I've noticed with Real Truck is that they're actually stocking the parts and pieces for these boards. So if you're out of warranty and you need to make a repair, you have access to that stuff also. And I think that's awesome. As a big right to repair guy, I think the fact that you can get those parts and pieces is absolutely fantastic. So with that being said, thank you guys very much for tuning in. If this is your first time tuning in, please hit that subscribe button down below. Remember, likes go a long way to support the channel. I will see you guys next time.